Professor Gokhale will be speaking on very significant thing which has a deep impact on the way we think about consciousness. So with this, I directly invite Professor Gokhale sir to please come up and deliver his talk.
Presentation is problem of consciousness, idealism and solipsism. Some points of contact between Indian and Western philosophy. In this speech, my main interest is to see how certain issues discussed in Western philosophy can make sense in Indian tradition. I will discuss three issues here: the hard problem of consciousness, idealism and solipsism. I am interested how these views are presented and how they are criticized. These three themes are interrelated. David Chalmers, an Australian philosopher and cognitive scientist, raised what he called the hard problem of consciousness. As a solution of this problem, he proposed what he called panpsychism, which can be called a modern variety of idealism. And idealism, when stretched to its limits, leads to solipsism. I want to discuss these themes in intercultural context by bringing both Indian and Western philosophies in a dialogue. Let me first discuss the hard problem of consciousness. As Joseph Levin has formulated the hard problem of consciousness, it is basically about the explanatory gap between consciousness and the physical. The problem has been raised on the background of eliminativism or reductionism advanced by some modern philosophers of mind. According to eliminativism, mental phenomena do not exist at all over and above physical phenomena or brain processes. And according to reductionism, the mental phenomena exist, but they are reducible to behavior or brain processes. According to Chalmers and other spokespersons of the hard problem of consciousness, many cognitive and behavioral functions can be explained as brain functions. But something remains which cannot be so explained, namely the experiential aspect of it. The experiential aspect of consciousness refers, for example, to its subjectivity. Consciousness has subjectivity, that is, it contains eye motion, which cannot be explained as a physical function. Another aspect is its impenetrability. Being of any conscious being is unique and anyone else cannot understand it in its true sense. Nagel stated this problem by raising difficulty in understanding what is to be a fact. The hard problem of consciousness asks for explanation of this. It asks why consciousness is so different from the functions of brain. According to Chalmers, there is a problem with modern materialism or physicalism, which regards consciousness or phenomenal functions as reducible to or caused by physical functions. While arguing against this position, Chalmers refers to the idea of zombies, that is, the living beings which have all the biological functions but lack consciousness. Though such beings do not exist as a matter of fact, they are conceivable. This shows, according to Chalmers, that it is not necessary that if there are all physical biological functions in a being, like other living beings, they must cause consciousness. According to him, the conceivability of zombies disproves materialism. On the basis of this, Chalmers tries to give a non-materialist explanation of consciousness. On this background, if we turn to Indian tradition, we can ask, can the hard problem of consciousness be raised in Indian philosophical context? We can say that we don't find eliminativist or reductionist approach to consciousness which gives rise to the problem. So let us consider some major philosophical approaches in Indian tradition. Let us first consider the so-called materialism of the Charvakas. Although it is called Bhutavad or Bhuta Chaitanyavad, it does not either eliminate consciousness nor does it reduce it to material elements. It offers a causal explanation of consciousness. Accordingly, consciousness arises from the four Mahabhutas when they are combined in a particular way. Charvakas do not say that consciousness is reducible to the four Mahabhutas, nor do they say that only four Mahabhutas exist, consciousness does not. Now the question is, how does consciousness, which is of a peculiar nature, come into existence from matter? Here Charvakas put forth the theory of heterogeneous causation. Their well-known arguments are Pinvadibhyo Madashaktiva. Just as the intoxicating power which is not there originally in the molasses comes into existence due to process of fermentation, similarly consciousness, though it is qualitatively different from material elements, can come into existence from them. Then another metaphor is that of the red color. So there is no red color in the ingredients of palm, but by chewing them, the red color arises. Here, the drishtantas, namely intoxicating power which arises in molasses and red color which arises in the chewed palm, are not examples, udaharana of consciousness, but they are analogies, upamana of consciousness. They only indicate how heterogeneous causation is possible. An important point which needs to be considered here is that here cause is understood as it is generally done in Indian philosophical systems as necessary prerequisite and not as the sufficient condition. That is, material basis is necessary for consciousness to arise according to them, it is not the sufficient condition. So, zombies, that is the beings which possess the material conditions which can give rise to consciousness, but in whom consciousness does not arise, are perfectly conceivable in Charvaka framework without harming their materialism. A question is raised here about the theory of causation implicit in Charvaka explanation of consciousness. Ramakrishna Bhattacharya keeps the question open. According to Satkayavada or Parinamavada, consciousness is there in the material elements in latent form, it becomes manifest. According to Asatkayavada or Arambhavada, consciousness arises anew. In both the cases, no extra material source or basis of consciousness is accepted. Another point of clarification could be labeled here. Charvakas presented their materialism in a crude form, bringing out the correlation between the four material elements with consciousness. With the advent of science, it is noticed that it is not physical elements in general, but a particular form of matter, namely the brain or neurological system, which is closely correlated with consciousness. Hence, not the four material elements as such, but brain functions is a necessary condition of consciousness. Unlike Charvaka Darshana, other schools of Indian philosophy do not regard material body as the cause of consciousness, but they accept some independent substance such as Atman or Purusha or Jiva as the source of consciousness. Buddhism is an exception which does not accept any substance as the source of consciousness, but regards consciousness as non-substantial event or occurrence, which is a momentary item in the series of consciousnesses. The realist schools of Buddhism accept material form, that is Rupa, along with consciousness. The material form has its own series, the material series. The two series exist together and also interact with each other. The consciousness series has an interaction with the material series in two ways. Any consciousness, number one, any consciousness arises from certain causal conditions. Consciousness of the immediately preceding moment is one of the causal conditions, that is Anantara Pratyaya. Other causal conditions, namely sense organs, objects, and other supporting conditions are material in nature. Number two, mind, that is consciousness, is regarded as the main cause of all actions, including speech and physical behavior. Here it should be noted that though according to the realist Buddhists, material series and consciousness series interact with each other, one series does not get transformed into another series. Each series maintains its identity as a mind series or a material series, Rupa or Nam. Hence, according to Buddhism also, consciousness is not reducible to matter. In this way, the fact that consciousness is essentially different from matter seems to be accepted in all systems of Indian philosophy. Chalmers' argument is like the following. Materialism is reductive or eliminative, and as a result, it cannot explain certain core aspects of consciousness. Hence, why does consciousness have these core features becomes a hard problem in the materialist framework. According to him, in order to solve this problem, one has to reject the materialist framework and search for an alternative explanation of consciousness. Chalmers finds such an alternative explanation in what he calls panpsychism, that is the doctrine that everything is psychical in nature. This panpsychism is a kind of modern avatar of idealism. We will discuss it in the next section. Here my question is whether the so-called hard problem of consciousness raised by Chalmers is a genuine problem. I want to suggest that in fact it is just a how problem and not a high problem. Chalmers raises it as a high problem because it is his reaction to the framework of reductive materialism. But if we consider it in the framework of non-reductive materialism, then it remains a how problem. Neuroscientists have been exploring and finding out how different brain functions are associated with the states of consciousness, including the higher meditative states. They treat the problem about different states of consciousness as a how problem. Raising it as a why problem gives an impression that it must be solved through an alternative metaphysics. There may not be any need for an alternative metaphysical explanation at all. In the framework of non-reductive materialism, mind or consciousness can be accepted as a fact. However, there are other important questions about consciousness for a mind. For example, control over mind, creation of higher mental states of mind, which are practical in nature. Yoga systems in Indian tradition have made a significant contribution in answering these questions. However, they are not concerned with this issue here. With this response to the hard problem of consciousness, let me turn to the next theme, that of idealism. So, the second section is for idealist trends in East and West. In that, the first topic is, or the subtopic is primacy of I, Atman, Descartes and Shankara. There is a striking similarity between the starting points of Descartes' thought and Shankara's thought. Descartes started by doubting everything and came to a conclusion that the doubter, that is the I, cannot be doubted. Shankara, in the beginning of his Brahma Sutra Bhashya, argued that the whole practice of the ways of knowing and the objects of knowledge, pramana, prameya, vyavahara, can be regarded as dubious, rather mithya. But we have to make an exception to Atman. As he says, Sarvo hi Atma Astitvam Pratyeti na Naham Asmi. Everybody experiences the existence of Atman. Nobody experiences I am not. In another text called Svatma Nirupanam, attributed to Shankara, it is said, Asti Swayamityasmin Vishaye Kasyasti Samshaya Punsa Tatrapi Samshayaste Samshayita Yasa Eva Bhavasitva. Which person has a doubt about the fact that oneself exists? If there is a doubt about this also, then the answer is, whosoever is the doubter, you are the same as that. Hence, just as Descartes claimed that the existence of mind as a thinking substance cannot be denied, Vedantists have claimed that the existence of Atman as an enduring entity cannot be denied. However, having ascertained the existence of the self or soul, the journey of the two philosophers went in two different directions. Descartes held that the doubter mind substance is after all imperfect mind. The idea of imperfect mind substance leads to that of a perfect mind substance, that is God. Hence, Descartes constructed a dualistic worldview consisting of mind, matter and God. Something similar to Madhva's Advaita Vedanta. Shankara went in a direction of non-dualism in which the individual Atman was identified with the cosmic Atman Brahman. Atma Tattva. Here it can be noted in passing that the closest parallel to Shankara's Advaita Vedanta in Western philosophy seems to be F.H. Bradley's metaphysical dualism. Bradley rejected plurality and regarded reality as one. The nature of reality, according to him, was experience. He is said to have combined rationalism and mysticism in his thought. The difference between the two forms of idealism was that the nature of reality for Shankara is pure consciousness, for Bradley is an integrated whole. Secondly, Bradley's philosophy is largely based on rational argumentation. Shankara's non-dualism is largely based on the authority of holistic scriptures. Of course, there was a basic problem with Shankara's postulation of Atman as well as the Cartesian cogito. It involved a leap from I or Atman as a pronoun to the soul or Atman as a noun. The word Atman in Sanskrit is used both as a pronoun and noun. For example, in the Gita statement, Atmaiva Yatmano Bandhu, Atmaiva Rikuratmana. The word Atman is used as a pronoun, which means oneself. It does not refer to self as a substance. Many such examples can be cited. On the other hand, the word is used as a noun referring to an eternal substance which is the ground of consciousness. Though grammatically the distinction is clear, that is Atman as pronoun and Atman as noun, philosophers have a tendency to jump from pronominal use of the word Atman to its nominal use. Hence, when Shankara said everybody experiences the existence of Atman, nobody experiences I am not, he seemed to suggest that since everybody accepts the existence of oneself, it follows that everybody accepts the existence of the soul substance. This is problematic. Similarly, Descartes argued that the pronoun I in the cogito is not just a pronoun, it stands for the mind or soul as a substance. These rules of Shankara and Descartes were not acceptable to all. In the West, David Hume rejected the self as substance. He said that self is nothing but bundle of impressions. In India, Buddhists rejected the existence of Atman as a substance. They said that there are 5 aggregates, but no Atman. Among the 5 aggregates, matter or material body, that is Rupa, was one of the aggregates. The other 4 aggregates consisted of mind, that is consciousness, and mental states, that is feeling, perception, and volition. But there was an idealist school in Buddhism called Yogacara, which rejected the existence of material aggregate, that is Rupa. Hence, against the Atmavada of Vedantics and others, Yogacara Buddhists say that there is only consciousness series, Vijnana Sandar, but no Atma. So, now Vedanta idealism versus Buddhist idealism. Hence, one of the major differences between Vedanta idealism and Buddhist idealism is that the Vedantic idealism centers on the concept of Atman as a permanent substance which has consciousness as its essence, whereas Buddhist idealism, though it regards consciousness as basic, denies the existence of self or Atman and its ground. This difference, as I have suggested, can be compared with the difference between Descartes and Hume in the West. Whereas Descartes regards mind or soul as the substance which is the ground of thought, Hume does not accept any such substance. Atmavada versus Anatmavada is one dimension of the difference between Vedanta idealism and Buddhist idealism. The other dimension is that the former can be called objective idealism, whereas the latter as subjective idealism. The idealism found in Upanishads and Shankara's philosophy is objective idealism in that it claims the whole world to be the nature of consciousness. The Buddhist idealism, popularly called Vijnanavada or Yogacara, can be called a subjective idealism as it starts with one's personal conscious experience and denies the existence of everything external to it or what is supposed to be independent of it. The difference between Shankara's idealism and Vasubandhu's idealism is reflected in the way they explain the appearance of the world. Shankara uses the model of illusion for explaining the appearance of the world, whereas Vasubandhu uses the model of hallucination. The model of illusion assumes the form something is there, but it is organized differently. There is a conch shell, but it appears to be seen. By using this model, Shankara would say, there is Brahman, but it appears to be the world. This model suits to objective idealism. Vasubandhu, unlike Shankara, uses the model of hallucination or dream to state the form. In fact, there is nothing outside there, but there appears to be something. This model used by Vasubandhu is more suitable for subjective idealism. Now, within Buddhist idealism, now I come to Nirakarvad and Alikakarvad. Within Buddhist idealism, we have two varieties. One is Sakarvad, it should be Sakarvad and Alikakarvad, or Nirakarvad. Sakarvad and the other is Nirakarvad or Alikakarvad. According to Sakarvad, the object of any consciousness exists as the form or akara of the consciousness. The philosophers like Dharmakirti, Jnanashri Mitra and Ratnakirti defended Sakaravad. Against this, Ratnakara Shanti represented Alikakaravad. According to Alikakaravad, the form or object which appears to a conscious mind is unreal, Ali. In other words, consciousness in itself does not have any form. What appears to it is unreal. Alikakaravad is close to Vasubandhu's form of Jnanavad, according to which anything external to consciousness is unreal. Every experience of the external is a false projection caused by past karma. Vasubandhu's denial of the external world is similar to Cartesian doubt about the existence of the external world. By applying the model of doubt, Descartes doubted every aspect of the external reality. He doubted the existence of body. He raised a doubt that perhaps he is just dreaming even when he is in his waking state. In a way, through his doubt, he was imagining an idealistic situation which is close to the idealism of Vasubandhu in the illusion. Again, Vasubandhu's model of idealism, which is a kind of Alikakaravad. Against that, Dharmakirti's approach is that of Sakaravad, according to which whatever appears to consciousness is inseparable from consciousness. It is the akara of consciousness itself. The argument which Dharmakirti gave for this form of idealism is the well-known argument from Sahopalambha. His argument runs, Sahopalambha abhedo nigatathyo. Because the object blue and the cognition of blue are always found together, there is no differentiation between them. So the blue object does not exist independently of its being cognized, and there is no cognition without an object. Dharmakirti's argument can be called forerunner of George Berkeley's idealist argument based on the principle essay is perceived. To be is to be perceived. Both Dharmakirti and Berkeley held that the object of perception is contained in the perception. Idealism in the West had to face the challenge posed by materialism, realism, positivism, and the common sense philosophy. The logical positivists claim that the statements asserting idealistic metaphysics were not verifiable and hence meaningless. Another strong opponent of idealism was G. Moore. His criticism of idealism appears in different forms. He was a defender of common sense, as is evident from his paper in defense of common sense. Idealism, which asserts the existence of consciousness as the only reality, conflicts with our common sense view of the world. Secondly, Moore particularly wrote against Berkeley's version of idealism in his paper, Refutation of Idealism, and in another paper, The Proof of the External World. He gave his proof of the external world. In Indian tradition also there were materialist and realist schools which were opposed to idealism. Charvaka Darshana is popularly known as materialist school, but it has also two sophisticated versions which accept inference as praman along with perception. So, two versions are: one, verificationist approach of the more educated, that is Sushikshita Taracharapata, mentioned by Jayanta in his Nyayamukari, and the other is pro-common sense approach of Purandara, who accepted Loka Prasiddha Anuman as mentioned by Kamalashila in Tattva Sanjaya Pandita. There are also realist schools such as Vaibhashika and Sautrantika school of Buddhism, Nyaya Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, and Purva Mimamsa. These are all realist schools, though they are not materialists. They all accept the external material world as real. They accept the existence of oneself as embodied person and also the existence of other embodied persons. So, the debate between realism and idealism is an important area of controversy in Indian philosophy as well as Western philosophy. Idealists have tried to show how their position is consistent and how it can explain everything. Realists have tried to find faults with idealism arguments. Here it is interesting to see how common sense view of the world dissolves rather than solves the question of idealism. Let us consider a person who sincerely believes that idealism is true. He believes that ultimately there is nothing outside consciousness which exists independently of consciousness. Such a person in his daily life does believe that he is an embodied person. He also believes that there are other embodied persons with whom he agrees or disagrees in practical and philosophical matters. When he goes to sleep, he temporarily is in the state of deep sleep in which he is not dreaming and is unaware of the external world also. But when he wakes up, he does believe that the external world did exist when he was in deep sleep. This idealized person could also be a meditator. In the state of meditative trance, consciousness alone exists for him, but after some time he comes out of the state and observes the world as real. So experience of the world is more continuous than the experience of isolated consciousness. In other words, an idealist in his philosophical mood may question the independent existence of external world, but in his practical life he does believe, rather has to believe, that the world external to consciousness does exist. To use the terminology of three levels of existence, Pratibhasika Satta, Vyavaharika Satta, and Paramarthika Satta, illusory existence, empirical practical existence, and ultimate existence, Vyavaharika Satta corresponds to the common sense view of the world. Pratibhasika Satta corresponds to the object that we experience at the level of illusions, hallucinations, and dreams. These objects are sublated or falsified at the level of Vyavaharika Satta. Idealists claim that there is a level of existence beyond Vyavaharika Satta, that is Paramarthika Satta, the essence of which is consciousness. Here my question is, can Vyavaharika Satta, that is the empirical practical level of our existence, which can also be called common sense level, be sublated? Here I want to suggest that the common sense level can be critically analyzed and made more and more sophisticated, but it cannot be sublated or falsified. The so-called Paramarthika Satta, even if it exists, does not exist beyond the Vyavaharika Satta, but it can be re-understood in the framework of Vyavaharika Satta itself. That there is an external world is a part of our common sense belief, which is a necessary presupposition of our own. Idealists regard the external world or even our embodied existence as unreal or mere appearance. I want to assert that these claims of the idealists amount to the breaches of common sense view of the world. they are intrinsically paradoxical. If I am not an embodied human being, but disembodied consciousness, I cannot aspire for knowledge. I cannot participate in philosophical discussions. I cannot advocate any philosophical position, even the idealist position. Here I want to suggest that denial of common sense view of the world amounts to the fallacy of pragmatic contradiction. It is the same fallacy which deniers term as the pseudo-thesis pakshabhasa for opposed by its utterance. Svabhachana virodha. Pragmatic contradiction is not a logical contradiction. Logical contradiction is a contradiction between two statements. Pragmatic contradiction would occur if a statement contradicts with the necessary presuppositions of the very act of making the statement. A pragmatic contradiction can be committed in many ways. If I utter a sentence saying that I cannot utter a single word, it is a pragmatic contradiction. But a dumb can write down that he or she cannot utter a single word, that is not a pragmatic contradiction. But there are subtler and more basic forms of pragmatic contradiction which common persons do not commit, but some philosophers. Matter does not exist, mind does not exist, I am the only being, other beings do not exist, space does not exist, time does not exist are some of the claims made by some philosophers. They are examples of pragmatic contradiction. Similarly, to say that there is no subject objectivity, or to say that in fact I have no body at all, will be the cases of pragmatic contradiction. Such philosophical claims go against the common necessary presuppositions of making a statement in a social context. Such common necessary presuppositions can be roughly included in what Dean calls common sense beliefs. What Dean calls common sense beliefs can be called, in Indian context, the beliefs basic to Vyavaharika Sattva. And suggesting, in other words, that any philosophical position which falsifies or sublates Vyavaharika Sattva is an example of pragmatic contradiction. Idealism, whether that of Shankara's Advaita or Buddhist Yogacara school, can be accused of committing this fallacy. I want to claim that Vyavaharika Sattva is basic to both, that is the so-called Pratibhasika Sattva as well as the so-called Paramarthika Sattva. Illusory existence is not possible without empirical existence, and even the so-called ultimate existence can be accepted only if it does not go against the empirical existence. There cannot be the so-called ultimate existence which falsifies the empirical existence, and the extraordinary experience which a yogin may call Brahman experience also happens within the framework of empirical existence. I am suggesting that we have to understand liberation as a human goal, not as something belonging to transcendent bodiless soul, but as a state of being belonging to an empirical embodied human being who are human beings. Unlike Western forms of idealism, which largely rest on reasons and arguments, Indian forms of idealism have a peculiar feature that they make an appeal to direct realization of the ultimate truth. Buddhism classifies prajna, that is wisdom, into three kinds: Shrutamayi, Chintamayi, and Bhavanamayi, that is wisdom based on the study of scriptures, wisdom based on reasoning, and wisdom based on meditative trance. The last type of prajna is regarded as a direct insight into the truth. This threefold model of wisdom is accepted in all schools of Buddhism, including the idealist school. Similar manifold approach to Atman Brahman is promoted in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in the statement, the Atma should be seen, heard, thought about, and contemplated about. Atmavare Drashtavyaha, Shrotavyaha, Mantavyaha, Nididhyasita. It is held that the truth of the identity of Atman and Brahman is ultimately realized by direct realization, aparokshanubhuti. However, how far such a meditative insight or the so-called direct realization can be called an authoritative source of the knowledge of the idealist metaphysical truth can be questioned. After all, the meditative insight is very personal. It is a non-shareable, non-linguistic, non-conceptual and objectless experience. Yogis of different metaphysical beliefs can have the same type of experience but interpret it according to their metaphysical backgrounds. Now we come to what can be called mitigated forms of idealism, that is, milder forms of idealism. The idealism which denies the existence of external world can be called an extreme form of idealism. But if we do not regard external world as unreal, but we regard it as inseparably related to consciousness, then also we get an idealism which can be called a mitigated idealism. For example, different forms of Vedanta such as Vishishtadvaita, Shuddhadvaita, similarly the Kashmir Shaivism, which reject Mayavad of Shankara but accept consciousness as omnipresent, can be called mitigated forms of idealism. Similarly, in recent times, David Chalmers presented a thesis called panpsychism, which can be called a mitigated form of idealism. Panpsychism for him stands for the thesis that some fundamental physical elements have mental states. He does not specify which particular fundamental entities. He keeps it open. For example, they could be quarks or photons. Chalmers' panpsychism can be called micro-panpsychism because it claims that some fundamental micro-elements might be having mental states. They might be having consciousness, experience, etc. So Chalmers himself notices that panpsychism has to face a problem which he calls combination problem. The problem can be stated as follows. Panpsychism asserts that micro-elements such as quarks have mental states such as experiences. They can have micro-experiences. We find the signs of experiential states in gross living bodies. Our experiences can be called macro-experiences. Now the question is, how do micro-experiences combine and yield macro-experiences? Chalmers believes that someday or the other this problem will be solved. The panpsychism that Chalmers proposes can be called micro-panpsychism. To overcome the combination problem that panpsychism faces, some analytical philosophers of mind have theorized macro-panpsychism, or what can be called cosmopsychism. According to cosmopsychism, the world as a whole is qualified by consciousness. Advaita Vedanta can be regarded as a form of cosmopsychism if we regard the world as Brahman. For example, Al-Bahari has traced panpsychism in Advaita Vedanta. But we have seen that in Advaita Vedanta there is a tendency to deny the existence of the empirical world. Against this, a scholar from Chennai, S. Siddharth, along with Ananda Vaidya, has traced panpsychism in Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita. However, so this can be called macro-panpsychism, one form of macro-panpsychism. So, however, macro-psychism is also not free from problems. Just as micro-panpsychism has to face combination problem, macro-panpsychism has to face individuation problem. If the whole world is conscious, how is this consciousness split into individual consciousnesses of animals or humans? Chalmers and others are primarily unhappy about the physicalist approach to consciousness. It cannot solve the hard problem of consciousness according to them. I have suggested that the non-reductive materialism, like that of Charvaka, which explains consciousness in terms of heterogeneous causation, can avoid the hard problem of consciousness. Even if we grant that the specific features of consciousness such as subjectivity, experiential character and impenetrability cannot be fully captured in physical terms, panpsychism of any form cannot be an answer to the problem. One has also to consider the special features of consciousness, one special feature of consciousness, namely its embodied character. Consciousness arises within the limits of an organic body. Panpsychism does not take into account this basic feature. So with this I come to the last theme, that is solipsism. Solipsism, that is the view that I alone exist, is an extreme response to the problem of other minds. One can have a direct access to one's own mental states, but one cannot have direct access to other person's mind. Hence, one can argue for solipsism even in realistic terms, which will amount to claim that I am the only living being in the world. But realism does not necessitate solipsism in any way. Idealism, on the other hand, if understood in a certain way, can necessitate solipsism. If consciousness alone exists and nothing exists outside consciousness, since the consciousness immediately available to me is my consciousness, I am forced to question the existence of any other conscious beings, because if at all they exist, they would be outside my consciousness. However, idealists have a tendency not to attach importance to this problem. They either sidetrack this problem or try to overcome it. Descartes starts his philosophical inquiry with skeptical doubts, where he doubts the existence of the whole world, including the physical bodies. Then he asserts that the doubter cannot be doubted, but then understanding imperfect existence of oneself, he argues that there must be a perfect being who we call God. With this new premise, that is God as a perfect being and creator, he accepts the plurality of embodied souls similar to himself. Berkeley's idealism is based on the principle esse percipi, to be is to be perceived, but the question arises, perceived by whom? Strictly speaking, he should have started with himself and questioned the existence of others who are souls or spirits which are not perceived by him. He does not do that. His main focus is denial of matter, which is beyond sensation of anyone. So anything that exists must be content of some mind, his own mind or someone else's mind, or if there is no person there, it is the content of God's mind, which is everywhere. On one occasion, he accepts that we do not see another man directly. As he says, it is plain we do not see a man. If by man is meant that which lives, moves, perceives and thinks as we do. But what we see is only such a collection of ideas as directs us to think there is a distinct principle of thought and motion like ourselves, accompanying and represented by it. Similarly, God also is seen, according to Berkeley, through his representations. Like theistic idealists of the West, objective idealists in India, that is, the Advaita Vedantins, do not regard other minds as a big issue. The only issue is how the single Brahman is related to many jivas. They resolve this issue by using the analogies such as Avachedavad and Pratibimbavad. According to Avachedavad, Brahman is like space and individual souls are like the space covered by a pot or a room. Ghatakash, Mathakash. And according to the Pratibimba, Brahman is like a moon and the individual souls are like the reflections of moon in water. The other part of the answer is that plurality of jivas or existence of other jivas is accepted only at empirical level, that is Vyavaharika Satta, at the transcendental level, that is Paramarthika Satta, there is no otherness. The subjective idealists of India, namely Yogachara Buddhists, generally take it as a responsibility to explain the existence of many living beings. Vasubandhu in his Vimshatika takes it for granted that there are many living beings, but since they are all without material body, the question arises how they can interact with each other. For example, how is interpersonal communication possible without mediation of physical bodies? Or how to explain that a butcher kills a goat with a weapon when the bodies of the butcher and the goat and also the weapon do not exist. All the living beings are just consciousness series, vijnana santana, and out of the four causal conditions, there is hetu, alambana, adhipati, samanantara, and adhipati. Hetu, that is in form of physical sense organs, and alambana in the form of the objects, are not available in idealistic theory. Here, Vasubandhu argues that dialogue between two consciousness series is possible without mediation of material bodies. Two consciousness series can communicate with each other by becoming adhipati pratyek of each other's knowledge. There is another question. If the objective world is not there at all, how is the shared experience of an object possible? This is not an easy question for Yogacharyas. There is no God or Brahman or Maya which can create a shareable illusory world. Here, Yogacharyas take recourse to the impressions of the past karma, which are called vasana or alaya vijnana. Two or more consciousness series see a common object as a result of the matching impressions of their past karmas. So now I come to Dharmakirti and Jayasmith, proof of other points. That there are consciousness series than oneself was an assumption on part of Vasubandhu, but this was not a matter of assumption for Dharmakirti. In his work, Santanantara Siddhi, Dharmakirti gave an argument for proving the existence of mind series other than one's own. The argument runs, having seen in one's own body that one's speech and actions are preceded, that is caused, by one's intending mental act, which is called Ichha-Chitta. One understands existence of a similar mental act when one sees similar actions elsewhere, that is outside oneself. And then he says the same reasoning is applicable in the case of mind only doctrine also. First he gives an argument with regard to in the framework of Sautrantika, and then he says that the same argument can be extended to Yogacara framework as well. This argument resembles John Stuart Mill's argument on the question of evidence for attributing sensation or thoughts or mind to the walking and speaking figures which one observes. Mill gave two reasons. One, they have bodies like me, which are the antecedent condition of feelings, just as in my body feelings arise, similarly these similar bodies also, in those bodies also, feelings must be arising. Second, they exhibit the acts and outward signs which in my own case I experience to be caused by feelings. So in my case, my feelings are the causes of my external behavior and actions. Similarly, I see the external behavior or actions in the case of other bodies, so they also must be preceded by feelings. Out of the two evidences, the second matches with Dharmakirti's argument. Mill's argument is famously called an argument from analogy. And perhaps following that, Janardhan Gaderi has suggested that what we find in Dharmakirti's text is a sort of argument from analogy for the existence of others. Here I would like to suggest that to regard Dharmakirti's argument as analogical is rather unfair to his approach to inference. Dharmakirti never gives authentic status to analogical inference. For him, a good reason must be based on either causation or identity, tadutpatti or tadadmya. And in Santanantara Siddhi, it is the argument based on the causal relation between actions and thoughts. In fact, Mill's second argument mentioned above, which is similar to that of Dharmakirti, is also based on such a causal relation. However, what is important in this context is that wherever existence of others was more or less an assumption for many Indian and Western idealists, for Dharmakirti, even in its idealist stance, it required a proof. Now we come to Ratnakirti's argument for Solipcism. Though Dharmakirti tried to establish the existence of other minds in his Santanantara Siddhi, a later Buddhist idealist, Ratnakirti, who was otherwise a follower of Dharmakirti, did not agree with it. He wrote the essay Santanantara Dushanam, refuting the argument for the existence of another mind series. One of his main points is that an idealist who denies everything external to mind has to deny another mind also being external to one's own mind. He also considers the question whether Buddha knows that there are other minds. If he knows, then Buddha's knowledge has subject-object duality, which is against the Buddhist faith. If he does not know that there are other minds, then the Buddha will not be omniscient. Ratnakirti answers this question by saying that there is no other mind at all, so the question whether the Buddha knows another mind does not arise. It is not possible to discuss the argument in detail, but there are at least two problems with Dharmakirti's argument. One, Dharmakirti's solipsistic idealism, that is Santanantara Abhavavad, is defective due to commission of the fallacy of Slovachana Virodha. Ratnakirti in fact refers to the fallacy in his work Santanantara Dushanam. He claims at conventional level one can have a favorable doubt, a kind of sandeha, that perhaps there are other minds and hence can make a speech with the suspected other. Hence, commission of the fallacy called Slovachana Virodha, that is contradiction with one's own speech, is not possible at all. Ratnakirti's argument, I think, does not hit the main issue. The main issue is not whether we can have speech at conventional level, but whether we can consistently say to the other, the suspected other, that the other does not exist. Number two, another problem with the argument, asking the question about Buddha's knowledge about the existence of another mind itself presupposes the belief in the Buddha's mind, which is another mind. Ratnakirti also asserts that he does not fully rule out the possibility that the other minds may exist. His negation of the other minds is his paramarthika. But here I will reassert my original position. Vyavaharika satta is something which is undeniable. It can be explained, clarified, sophisticated, refined, but it cannot be explained away. No so-called Paramarthika Satya can rule out Vyavaharika Satya. The so-called Paramarthika Satya should be reconstructed and redefined so as to be accommodated as a part of Vyavaharika Satya. In meditative trance, I can experience pure consciousness. I can experience that I am isolated from everything else, and there is no appearance of anyone else. But that will be a temporary experience. Though spiritually, it could be an enriching and refreshing experience. It may help me in living the life in this world more happily and peacefully, but that is the limit of it. It should not be allowed to transcend or abrogate my existence as a part of empirical social world. Now I am asking a question. Belief in other minds, is it a presupposition or knowledge? I have suggested that the common sense beliefs Moore refers to are necessary presuppositions of our individual and social life in this world. Hence, that there are other sentient beings is a necessary presupposition of our social life. It can be asked here whether a necessary presupposition can be given the status of knowledge. In his paper, A Defense of Common Sense, Moore gives a long list of statements expressing common sense beliefs, which he calls truisms. Existence of other minds was one such truism. Moore claimed that he knew all those truths for certain. Wittgenstein, in his work on certainty, raises questions against G. Moore's claims for knowledge. Wittgenstein probably has no problem with sharing common sense beliefs with Moore, but he has a problem with Moore claiming to know these things for certain. Sometimes Wittgenstein suggests that Moore's use of the expression "I know" can be replaced by "I am of the unshakable conviction." Sometimes he says, I should like to say, Moore does not what he asserts to know, but it stands fast for him, as also for me. I am arguing on similar lines that the existence of other minds is a matter of common presupposition, though not a case of common knowledge. It is pragmatically necessary presupposition of all of us as we are all social beings or communicative beings. Now, Solipsism can be a case of pragmatic contradiction if one is trying to convince another person that there are no other minds, because such an act presupposes existence of the other person. But suppose one is living a solitary life and practicing deep meditation in which one is not aware of the other, only not even conceiving of the existence of the other, and afterwards, while reflecting on the experience, one thinks, I was the only person, there was no other person in my world at that time. Then it will not be a pragmatic contradiction. However, if the same person comes out of the meditative trance and reports to the other person about his meditative state, that at that time I realized that in fact there are no other persons, then the meditator is committing a pragmatic contradiction. I want to argue that solipsistic private experience or entertaining a doubt whether there is any other living being here and now in my own life world is a genuine possibility, as human being is not only a social animal but also an unsocial animal. Although generally he likes to be with others, sometimes at least he would like to isolate himself from others, experience and enjoy isolatedness. Of course, this did not lead us to think that such an isolated state or a solipsistic meditative state can be a permanent state, nor that such a state represents one's ultimate or true state of existence. So with this, my lecture is over. Thank you.
जाओ तो वही से लैपटॉप लगा कर
What a lecture. I'm amazed at the speed of your scholarship, sir. So, naturally, there will be some questions in your mind. You might not agree with some of the conclusions propounded by our speaker. So now, the session is open for discussion. But I have some request to make. While making your question, be precise. Okay? And don't make a counter question if you're not satisfied, because nobody can be completely satisfied in philosophical discussion. It always ends in aporia, to use a Greek word. Inconclusiveness is the characteristic of philosophical discussions. And while making your observations, try to be brief. So with this request, I would invite questions. The questioner should come here, introduce himself or herself, and then put his or her question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Ashkumar Tiwari, and I am studying PhD, third year philosophy honors. So, my question is that, as you said about panpsychism, and you told about the combination problem there, can't we associate it to the Vedic concept of Ratha, that is the cosmic order, that actually binds everything? And if we use that principle, that concept of Vedas here, then we will eventually escape from that problem and will lead to the concept that eventually everything is Brahman. And it can also be seen in modern physics, such as quantum entanglement, where we see that it associates itself to that concept that all is Brahman and everything is a manifestation of that same Brahman. So can't we solve that combination problem by using that concept?
So these cognitive scientists, they are not interested in metaphysical realization. And they are interested in explaining the empirical phenomenon that we have consciousness, and that consciousness has certain features which cannot be explained in terms of material conditions or physical functions. So what could be the alternative explanation? One alternative explanation is that you have suggested what can be called macro panpsychism. I have distinguished between micro and macro. That is, suppose somebody says something like monads, not exactly monads, but there are the atomic or minute elements in the world, and every minute element has experience. Suppose something like that is there. Then he was in search of, say, locating experience in the world, which we cannot locate in just brain functions. You cannot reduce consciousness to brain functions. So where can it be located? And his answer was that possibly it is in the quarks or such say minute elements that can be found. Now in that context, when you say that a person is conscious, we start with the atomic elements which have consciousness, but now we have to explain the consciousness that one person has. Suppose you say that person is nothing but just the combination of so many atoms, and every atom has its own consciousness. But now we are concerned with the consciousness of a person, and it is not a collection of consciousnesses. It is one consciousness. I am having a particular experience. So that is the combination problem. And the kind of say cosmo panpsychism you are suggesting, which may be rooted in Vedas, Upanishads, and Vedantas of different kinds. There you may say that the whole cosmos has consciousness. There my problem is that of individuation. The whole cosmos may have a consciousness, but I want to explain my particular consciousness that I have now. You cannot explain it just on the basis of Brahman, because Brahman has consciousness, therefore I am having such an experience. This will just give the possibility of my consciousness, but how can I explain that particular consciousness? And there I have suggested that there is this individuation problem, the other problem, not combination, but particularization. So, how one consciousness can be split into different individual consciousnesses.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Professor, and thank you for the 2 days of wonderful lectures. My question is regarding the problem of soul. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Shubham Parmanda, postgraduate student in the Department of Philosophy. So my question is that nowadays in the scientific evolution, when we are able to decipher every element of consciousness through physical and scientific elements like brain mapping, hormones, neuroreceptors. So is there now a way to establish the non-physical or immaterial nature of consciousness or self that science can also concur with?
Now, that is actually the problem of reductionism or eliminativism. That is, cognitive scientists, they try to explain everything in terms of brain functions and so on. Now they try to reduce it. Ultimately, it leads to some kind of reductionism. That everything is explained in terms of brain function. So, why to accept consciousness over and above these things? Now, actually, that I experience something, I have consciousness of something. This is something which I experience, and this is not reducible to brain functions. This is something different from brain functions, and then that is a problem for him, for Chalmers. That how to explain that? On what basis can we say that consciousness is something different from brain functions? And what is its nature? What is the root of that? You cannot trace everything to brain function.
Thank you so much, sir, for the very interesting talk. When you problematize your thesis regarding the existence of the world as well as consciousness, you, I think, as I consider, three assumptions like one is there is world and there is consciousness, and there is world, there is no consciousness. But there is consciousness, sorry, there is world, but there is no consciousness. Consciousness, yes, and there is no world, but there is consciousness. And there is world and there is consciousness. So here, in the second and third, there is some problem of ontology, that means ontological identity of the world. But does it possible to claim like this, there is no world and there is no consciousness? If it is possible, there is no consciousness. Does it possible? If it is possible, how is it possible?
If it is to be taken as mathematical possibility, there is both world and consciousness are there, but there is world but no consciousness, there is consciousness but no world, and there is neither world nor consciousness. So this first possibility nobody imagines. That there is no world, there is no consciousness. Are you conscious of this particular possibility? And if you are, then there is consciousness. And you are imagining this possibility in the world, in this world. So you have, it is good that there are some, the extreme materialists would say that there is only world but no consciousness. Extreme idealists would say that there is only consciousness but no world at all. But my general position is both are there, but the question is how they are related. And now, one possibility is that of dualism, that they are separate, like Sankhya or Descartes, that there is matter and consciousness which are distinct from each other. Whereas the problem is that we don't have any evidence to show that consciousness, disembodied consciousness exists. So whatever consciousness we experience, we have always experienced in the framework of body. And all these, even idealists were aware of that, and they tried to explain this phenomenon. That okay, in Jainas, for example, they said that yes, there is jiva, but that jiva has the same size as body. Or even Vedantists, when they said that everything is consciousness, they had to talk of avachya, to avachinna by body. So everybody has to take note of that, note of the fact that we experience consciousness within the bodily framework. And now, if that is so, what is the best explanation of that? So Charvakas are saying that consciousness arises within this framework itself. And of course, so many things will have to be searched for and so on and so forth. Charvakas, as I said, it is a very crude answer. And but the answer ultimately will have to get this particular thought that within the bodily framework, consciousness arises and how it arises.
Last one was the denial of both.
Denial of both is something like Shunyata. Yes.
Sir, I just wanted to ask that when Shankar is saying that there is appearance and that appearance is of something which is real. Vasubandhu is saying there is appearance but that appearance is not of something real. Hence there is nothing but it is appearing as something. But there is one position of Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo. He says that just like we have the physical senses and we have the glimpses of reality, the physical reality, in the same way we have the supra-physical senses and we catch the supra-physical entities. So hallucination in terms of Vasubandhu is actually not like that, in which sense the Sri Aurobindo has taken the same thing. So I just wanted to know, sir, whether the word is Maya or Bhram or Vibram or what actually it is, because as I thought that you were reducing the Paramarthik Satta into the Vyavaharik Satta. Like basically it is reverse. So the approach is very reverse. That we are approaching from the Pratibhasik Satta towards the Paramarthik Satta, but how come we are going to bring back the Paramarthik Satta and going to reduce it into the Vyavaharik Satta? So it becomes very clumsy in my mind, so I just wanted to have some clarification on that. Thank you, sir.
So I didn't try to reduce Vyavaharika Satta to Paramarthika Satta to Vyavaharika Satta. But I am saying that the so-called talk of Paramarthika Satta is possible only within the framework of Vyavaharika Satta. So you will have to give some kind of new pramana, give some kind of evidence of when you are talking about something Paramarthika. If you just go on saying that there is a realm higher than this, which is transcendent, it will be just a belief. Now, I am saying that, for example, you are experiencing samadhi. And while experiencing samadhi, after all, you are a person experiencing samadhi. It is not something your soul is experiencing samadhi. And experiencing samadhi means what? We are having a particular type of experience. Now that experience could be very pure, very peaceful, very energetic, whatever. And then the question will be that of interpretation of that experience. And then maybe Aurobindo had some experiences which ordinary people do not have. And he tried to give a kind of interpretation of that experience in terms of the kind of metaphysics that he accepted. Whether that particular interpretation should be accepted or not will be a question for us.
Question.
Yes,
sure, sure.
So the question is still if I can ask from here because it's just few words.
You don't have a mic, independent mic.
You can make your space
Yes,
from
yes.
there. Yeah. you
Based
can-
on everything you've said, can you say anything about Buddhist mysticism, which in theory would be a mystical experience of absence?
Mystical experience.
Buddhist mysticism.
This mystical experience. And again, about any mystical experience, I have a problem with this kind. But mystical experience means what? Ineffability. Ineffability. Something which cannot be expressed in words. Okay, and Buddhist system do talk about that. In Yogacara, in Madhyamika, they talk about experience of that kind which cannot be expressed in words. Now, if suppose reality cannot be expressed in words, then again you come to the level of language and try to explain. That becomes a problem. Okay. That is, I may have an experience which, what exactly is the experience of? That may not be. That is the distinction between nirvikalpaka and savikalpaka. That is the standard distinction made in Buddhist Buddhist tradition. That we can have nirvikalpaka experience in which there is no mental construction at all. But then, is that nirvikalpaka experience the true nature of ultimate reality? That is the claim made by Buddhists, that is the true nature of ultimate reality. So, Yogacharyas would say that consciousness is real, and in consciousness generally what we experience is duality. Subject-object duality. Consciousness is consciousness of some object. But then there is a consciousness without object. Okay, now suppose in trance, in meditative experience, we do not experience anything. Although there is some experience, there is some consciousness, and later on when we come out of that, so then we may say that yes, I had a grand experience, but what did you see there? I cannot say anything. Now can you say that that is the true nature of reality? That is my problem.
Congratulations, sir. I'm Kamlesh Yadav, research scholar from this department. I have a question regarding the hard problem of consciousness. That if someone feels like you have given the example that what is like to be a bear. If there are many people just living in a society, like they feel get hurt by others when they live in the community. So if this hurt or atrocity happens to any community members, so these type of feelings they get or experience they get, is it only experience or consciousness that is purely based in the air, or is it due to something? Is there a cause behind it? And if there is a cause behind it, who is doing this cause? Is it other, or is it due to oneself? If it is done by others, it may be possible due to this others and inside too the problem, the cause. But this cause is mental or physical. So this is my questions.
So there are two parts of it. One is the impenetrability. That is, you cannot peep into the mind of the other. The other person has certain experience, and it is a unique. Everybody has a unique being, experiential existence, experiential being, and that the other person cannot understand in its essence. But that does not mean that it does have many other aspects. That is, why a particular person, the person can describe it. What did I see? Communication is possible. Now, how is that communication possible? When I say, suppose I say, saw a red object and you understand it, and we can also verify a red object. Now, actually, the red object that I see is something private to me, and what you call red is also private to us. But somehow, communication is possible. Something similar. What I see, what I saw, and what you saw, there is some similarity, and the sameness of the word is also there. So this in communication, how is communication possible? If you cannot enter into consciousness of the other at all, but still communication is possible. So that is based on the belief that the experience can be communicated. It is also related to many factors. It is also caused by many factors. So some kind of interaction between mind and body is possible. Without that, communication will not be possible.
Thank you, sir. I'm Alundra, research scholar of the department. So, sir, my question is specifically, I have a problem when you say that there is a pragmatic fallacy when you say that matter does not exist. Okay? So, the thing is, I don't think there is any pragmatic fallacy in that, because, I mean, how can we prove that the matter exists when all we have is the sensations that are coming out of that particular matter which exists outside us. So all in all, I mean, what we have is the sensation that is coming out of coming out of that matter, particular matter, the chair. So out of this particular sensation, we cannot prove the independent existence of the matter itself. So it is not non-pragmatic, I guess. It is very logical. So that is nice.
See, when you speak, you came from there to here, with your body, and so you walked. That means you say, activated your material body, and you stood here and spoke with your mouth, your face. All this presupposes. I am not talking about proving that the matter exists. Therefore, I made a distinction between presupposition and knowledge. So there are certain necessary presuppositions. I am using a pen while writing. I am using a material object. Now, whether in final analysis that matter is reducible to say some quanta or whatever, that is a different. I am not concerned with that. At prima facie level, I do believe that there are material objects, and if I start saying that matter cannot be proved, so there is no matter at all, then I am committing a pragmatic sense.
It's like defense of common sense. It's like defense of common sense.
Yes, defense of.
Good afternoon, sir. Myself, Amisha. As you said that scientists tries to reduce consciousness. Here my question is, does the merger of biological and artificial intelligence create a new form of hybrid consciousness? Are you agree with this? As you said, scientists tries to reduce consciousness. I agree with you. But here my question is that does biological and artificial intelligence create new hybrid form of consciousness?
New habits.
Hybrid. Merger of biological and artificial intelligence create a new hybrid form of consciousness.
I don't know. And I think that it is not consciousness is not hybrid. And that is what these travelers and others they are saying. That whatever you try, artificial intelligence is not intelligence as such.
Sir, answer from the mic, please.
So, the artificial intelligence or the, robo, the question is whether robo is a living being, and then the answer is that no, he is not a living being. And this Chalmers gave this idea, example of zombie, which lacks consciousness, which performs all the bodily functions, but without consciousness. So this now this existence of another mind, the question of existence of another mind can be meaningfully raised in this particular context. That is simply because a certain moving figure is seen and it is performing various actions as I am performing. Then can I say that just as I have a mind, that moving figure also must have a mind, that robot also must be having a mind. So it does not have a mind, but how to prove it? That is the question. I think
I have to say something about some of your, I think, general statements about idealism, Indian idealism, Western idealism. One of such statements was, Indian idealism is based on authority, whereas Western idealism is based on reason and arguments. I totally disagree with you. Why? Because it was Vasubandhu for the first time formulated idealism. Then, the arguments for idealism, we have to look into Dhamkriti. In Dhamkriti Pramanavartik, the famous argument is Sahokulam Niyamat Avedo Tantiv. In fact, Moore's refutation of idealism, there you will find that he has somehow Dhamkriti in his mind, not Bhartale there. He is using the same language. The blue. Okay, so it is very general statement. Indian idealism is based on arguments, and then Shankar refutes them. In Brahma Sutra Shankar Bhas, he refutes the subjective idealism there. So you are somehow right that Shankar's idealism is objective idealism. Again I would say this is just a general statement. Why? Advaitic argument, Advaitic idealism is not objective idealism only. Why? Because there are three schools. One is Ajatva, another is Srishtiva, and there is another, that is Drishti Srishtiva. And that is very, in fact, one can say, the ideal model of idealism. And particularly Vedanti, Vedanta Siddhanta Muktavali God, that is Prakasanand, he is, I can claim that he is first subjective idealist, and he is conscious of that subjective idealism ultimately leads to solipsism. You have to accept. If only mind and mental exists, then there can be no argument for the existence of external world as well as for the existence of you. So he openly accepted this position that only I exist. And that is the doctrine of Ek Jeevavad. Now, all of these do not believe in the theory of Anek Jeevavad. There are so many of the things who believe in the theory of Ek Jeevavad. And in such Solipcism is the doctrine of Ek Jeevavad, which believes that only one and nothing this world. Okay, so that's how there are so many questions.
Thank you very much, Mishra-ji. I agree with many of the things that you said. I didn't say that Indian idealism is based on scriptures. I was particularly talking about Shankara's idealism as against Bradley's idealism. Bradley's idealism largely is based on arguments, and whereas Shankara's idealism is largely based on, again I use the word largely, not only. Now, it is true that Shankara criticizes Vasubandhu's form of idealism in the Brahma-sutra Bhashya. Personally, I have tried to, in my another article on Advaita Vedanta, I have tried to show that there is some inconsistency in Shankara's argument. On some occasions, he also supports something like subjective idealism. Whereas in that particular section, in Tarkapada, he criticizes Vasubandhu's idealism by saying that yes, at Vyavahara level you have to accept something which is external to consciousness. And of course, your reference to Ekajivavad, Drishti Srishtivad is well taken, that is important, and I should actually add those things somewhere in my paper also. That there are different versions of Indian idealism which I did not take into account, and that should be taken. Thank you.
Now I request Dr. Bhaveshwar Yadav to please deliver his vote of thanks.
Respected speaker, Professor Pradeep P. Gokhale ji, and audience. During these 2 days, we had a good discussion on the topic that we have already heard. Today, we have deep discussion on the problem of consciousness, idealism, and solipsism. Today's topic was basically beneficial for those students who are on the verge of entering into the field of research, especially in philosophy of mind and consciousness studies, as well as comparative philosophy. So Professor Gokhale has opened variety of topics for your convenience, and you can take it up seriously for your research. So, sir, I, on behalf of me and on the behalf of the Department of Philosophy and Religion, thank you heartily. And I also thank Professor Anand Mishra sir, who have since tomorrow actively participated as well as complemented the lecture. I thank our head under the leadership of whom we have successfully organized such kind of lecture series, and we have a couple of lectures that is going to be held on perhaps 16 March. So you all are requested to be present there as well. And I would also like to thank our students, especially those who have put the various questions from various angles and actively participated. So thank you all once again to be here and make this lecture series successful. Thank you.
सर बहुत पहले वहाँ पर था यार, मुझे देख के ये गिर गया है भाई, किसी का फूट पे
Thank you.